got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle, jingle, jangle, as I go riding.
Fallout New Vegas is really one of a kind. It's arguably the best Fallout game, at least from an RPG standpoint, and usually in the Fallout community it tends to be the fan favorite. That's not to say the other games aren't good in their own ways, New Vegas just has a special charm. Even all these years later, at this point, I replay the game at least once a year, and every time I get back into it, I'm always greeted by thriving community pages and seemingly endless amounts of content covering this 15-year-old game. There's even an active modding community, and at the time of me making this video, there's a fan-made remaster compiled of over 600 mods that I plan on trying out. So, now that it's time for my yearly playthrough, I decided to give this game what it's definitely earned from me throughout the years, a well-deserved and thoughtful review. Here's to add to the pile of content that still keeps this amazing game breathing. Pretty much every Fallout game follows the same baseline lore, New Vegas included. On October 23, 2077, the entire world was subjected to total nuclear annihilation, mainly starting between the United States and China. This was known as the Great War. At the time, a major corporation known as Vault-Tec provided safe bunkers to a select percentage of the American people that were known as vaults. After many years of isolation, one by one, the residents of each vault emptied out into the now post-apocalyptic America. This is where the actual games usually take place, a time where people have adjusted to the new world and civilization continues and adapts. New Vegas is unique though. While in the other games you start off as a vault dweller or a tribal member with some elaborate predetermined backstory, New Vegas starts you off with only one characteristic. You are a package courier. In the previous installment, Fallout 3, you grow up in a vault and have a very set-in-stone history and canonical age. In New Vegas, however, your backstory has little to no restraint. Your biggest and really only defining characteristic is your job. You can be any age, have any personality, or have any lifestyle. And this lack of restraint is what makes New Vegas so amazing in its roleplay factor. You can invent any backstory for yourself and it likely wouldn't be too far-fetched because of how ambiguous the courier's canon traits actually are. In the other games, there's usually a loose restraint to how the protagonist is intended to act, but with a more vague protagonist, the choice is completely up to you based on the decisions you make during your playthrough. You know the Dungeons & Dragons alignment chart? You can place the courier really anywhere on that and it will still be perfectly in character. The ambiguous nature of the courier is what makes them separate from the other Fallout protagonists. And speaking of alignment, a major feature that I genuinely think makes this game so much more impressive, even by today's standards, is the fact that you can literally kill anyone and the story will still progress in a meaningful way. It's virtually impossible to softlock yourself. The only non-killable NPCs are children, and that's probably just because it's very hard to market a game that allows you to harm children, and that was especially the case back in 2010. So, other than them, you can go on a full-blown killing spree if you really wanted to, and that includes faction leaders. Obsidian really wanted to make sure every character death was accounted for, since there's even unique dialogue and world differences for certain NPC deaths. And trust me, you kill a lot more NPCs than you think you do. There is one major trait every courier has though, and that's that they're a force to be reckoned with. Your decisions in New Vegas ultimately affect how the game ends, all the way from the humble nobody you start out as. The game begins with the general lore and factions being spelled out for you. And while there are many lesser factions within the Wasteland, there are three that have the strongest relevance in the story. That being the New California Republic, Caesar's Legion, and the reclusive Mr. House. I'll go into a bit more depth on these later, but for now I'll give a surface level explanation for each. The NCR is basically an organization that tries their best to replicate the pre-war American military and values the government the world once had. The Legion are hostile tribesmen who embrace ancient Roman brutality and ways of life, and Mr. House is a pre-war billionaire that's extended his own lifespan long enough to become the ruler of the entire Las Vegas area. In the intro, after the world is explained to you, you get reminded of who you are. You're working your job delivering a package to Mr. House on the New Vegas Strip. Unfortunately, you end up getting intercepted by a man in a checkered suit by the name of Benny. Benny shoots you and leaves you for dead after stealing your delivery, but miraculously, you manage to survive and recover in the nearby town of Goodsprings, and I have to say, this intro sequence goes absolutely hard.
From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
After being helped out by the town doctor in creating your character, you are greeted by sunlight for the first time in days, and the game begins. You have one objective: find the man who shot you. Goodsprings, despite being pretty small, is a very good starting area by typical RPG standards, and is probably my favorite beginning quest out of any Fallout game. Ghost Town Gunfight. This quest has you helping the townsfolk get ready to defend themselves against a group of angry demolitionists that call themselves the Powder Gangers. Or, alternatively, help the Powder Gangers take over the town of Goodsprings if you're feeling a little evil. The quest is pretty straightforward and gives you some decent rewards to start off with, but the real reason this quest shines is the mechanic that it introduces you to: the reputation system. Upon completing the quest, you gain either a positive or negative reputation with each side. Reputation is one of the most important, if not the most important mechanics in New Vegas. A lot of quests, relationships with characters, and item availability relies entirely on what kind of person your courier is. Gaining a reputation as a violent psychopath, and some groups may outright attempt to kill you on sight. Gain a reputation as a local saint, and people will look up to you like a celebrity and give you unique dialogue and quests. Reputation is what really gives your decisions a sense of weight in this game. After leaving Goodsprings, you're really able to go pretty much anywhere off the rip. The entire world is completely open to you, and the only thing stopping you from outright completing the game is the fact that you haven't completed all the main story quests yet. But you are greeted with a few major progression routes. One, although not recommended, is to beeline it straight for the New Vegas Strip from the highway. The reason this is usually a bad idea is because there are extremely high-level enemies that inhabit the northern segment of the highway. On my first playthrough, I actually completely ignored this advice and spent a good 30 minutes sneaking my way past all of them. Then, I gambled so much at one of the nearby casinos that they banned me from the tables. My first hour of the game, and I somehow managed to truly achieve the experience of gambling my entire savings away. Except my character had a stat of 10 luck, so I absolutely fucked these casinos over. Anyways, most players on their first playthrough will probably pick the second option, which is to go down the southern segment of the highway and loop around to the safer route north. Along the way, you run into a couple characters that have allegedly seen Benny, and through a series of side quests and favors, you gain more knowledge about his whereabouts. Here's where the beauty of the New Vegas quest system really shines. If you're doing a quest in this game, I can assure you that you'll probably end up completing 5 more along the way by accident. Every quest in this game is so interlocked with other quests, to the point where it's not uncommon to accidentally spend like 6 hours just doing random side content. Because this game really does just have a lot of side content. The first major non-Goodsprings side quest most players will come across is My Kind of Town, which involves you questioning the deputy of the town known as Prim, who saw Benny pass by the night you were shot. Unfortunately, he's actively being held hostage by a bunch of former Powder Gangers, so you need to quickly rescue him. However, Prim has a new issue, and that is that they desperately need a new sheriff to go along with their now free deputy. Your options are either a member of the Powder Gangers who happens to have law enforcement experience by the name of Myers, or asking the NCR nearby to enforce the town. This is arguably the first faction-based choice the player is given, kind of a practice for later in the story when you make much more important decisions. Who do you, as the player, think is more worthy of considering the town of Primm under their law? A single troubled man with law enforcement experience, or a somewhat poorly managed platoon of troopers? Both have their pros and cons. Regardless of whether or not you choose to help out Primm, rescuing Deputy Beagle still gives you information on Benny's whereabouts, and ironically enough, it's exactly where you're already in the direction of. Down the highway, you'll make your way into the town of Nipton. Pretty quickly, though, you'll notice it's, very hostile. The town of Nipton has been brutally overtaken by Caesar's legion, and you run into a few legionaries, along with a man named Volpe Zancanta, who happens to be one of the faction's highest-ranking members.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates. It's useful that you happen by. I want you to witness the fate of the town of Nipton, to memorize every detail. And then, when you move on, I want you to teach everyone you meet the lesson that Caesar's legion taught here, especially any NCR troops you run across. Then I bid you Wale, until we meet again.
Gonna be honest, between the NCR and Legion's introductions, the Legion takes the cake for me. You barely meet the NCR in Primm unless you directly go into their station, but the Legion basically has a faction leader come up to you and ask you a favor as you just stumbled upon him destroying an entire town. I don't think you'd even want to say no to that, whether you wanted to actually help or not. The man has a chainsaw strapped to his arm. Also, I just find it really funny that within the New Vegas community, it's basically become a staple to kill Oliver Swanek. Imagine being the only survivor of an entire town, and as you're celebrating, some random person comes up to you and obliterates you as you try to share the news with them. Cold. With no one left alive or untraumatized enough to speak about potentially seeing Benny pass through, your only option is really just to continue going down the highway. And eventually, you reach the town of Novak. It's pretty recognizable given there's a giant-ass T-Rex next to it, but of course your main goal here is finding Benny. If you're smart and snoop around the various NPCs' rooms here, you'll find a terminal talking about Benny's whereabouts. Or you'll do what I ended up doing on my first playthrough, and do a favor for the local daytime watchman for the T-Rex, Manny Vargas. This quest is named Come Fly With Me, and involves you going out to clear some irradiated humans, known as ghouls, from a rocket testing site down the road. The ghouls actually end up being surprisingly chill, and the quest involves you helping them fly into space. That's kinda it. There's really nothing else noteworthy about this quest, just you help a cult successfully fly off into the stars. Good for them, honestly. This quest does introduce you to two of some of the most important species in the game's lore, though, that being ghouls and super mutants. These are recurring enemies, and some are even passive NPCs or quest givers for the player. Ultimately, you get the information that Benny and his friends made their way up to Boulder City. There's still a few things to do in Novak, and it's worth mentioning that you actually meet what is probably most players' first companion. Companions being NPCs that follow you as a party member and have a much more in-depth story than the average NPC. Just another reason to hate the Legion, though, this companion, Boone, has a quest for you that involves you finding out who in the town kidnapped his wife and sold her to the Legion as a slave, so that he can get revenge. Boone, understandably so, will not hesitate to absolutely obliterate any legionaries that you come across with him in your party. He also tends to have the habit of activating a kill cam on random enemies 15 miles away, so every now and then you'll get jump scared by a sudden enemy death close up. Boone is actually my second favorite companion, and yes, I will be talking about my first later, because he's very important to our particular side faction. Once you make your way up to Boulder City, you end up finding out the NCR is in an active hostage situation with the men who robbed you alongside Benny. If you choose to go in as a hostage negotiator, they reveal to you Benny betrayed them and ran off to the New Vegas Strip, in the casino he owns, with your package included. You could also, with a high enough speech skill, solve the hostage situation and gain a positive reputation with both the NCR and Great Khans, which is actually really convenient for some later parts in the story. Otherwise, there is not a lot of quest content in Boulder City, but there is probably my favorite dialogue option in the entire game.
What the fuck are you doing? My brother died at the Battle of Hoover Dam. You're desecrating a war memorial. Oh, now it's on! Found you!
The first Battle of Hoover Dam, as said on the memorial in that clip, is also a very important piece of history for a few of the major factions, so I'll get into that a bit later. Once you reach the Vegas area, you'll be greeted by the town of Freeside, a run-down and poorer area than the actual New Vegas Strip. You're usually greeted by some thugs that attempt to rob and kill you, but otherwise you run into the various characters and smaller factions of the area. For the most part, the town is run by a faction known as the Kings. They're basically a bunch of Elvis impersonators who gained influence in the area, but as goofy as they may be, their leader offers various quests revolving around the life, business, and welfare of Freeside. Along with the Kings, there's the Van Graffs, who run a shop named the Silver Rush. They sell energy weapons because it wouldn't be a game about the future if you didn't have sick-ass laser or plasma rifles on the table. The Van Graffs also have a quest line you can follow, but most of the time I just blow the place up and steal all their weapons to sell for a shit ton of caps. Aside from killing them all, they function kinda similarly to a mob family, and their main quest has you bringing them one of the companions available to the player for them to kill. There is also the Garretts, who run the Atomic Wrangler Casino. You can help them out by gathering various sex workers for them. No, I'm not kidding, that's the actual quest.
Yes, sir. Vestal, please assume the... Servos active. Operation complete. Thank you for your business.
Freeside has a lot of really good early game content between all these mini factions, and I love how the game is intentionally designed to stop you from going too quick so you could experience it. The robot greeter for the New Vegas Strip requires you to have at least 2,000 caps in order to enter, or have a passport. And in Perfect Design, the two ways to get a passport are from doing quests in Freeside, either through the Kings or two guys named Mick and Ralph. Or go ahead and gamble at the Atomic Wrangler like I did and come back with full pockets and reach 2,000 in no time. My first time entering the Strip was amazing, to say the least. It's the most aesthetically pleasing area in the entire game, and it really encapsulates what Vegas is in both real life and in post-apocalyptic America. A vibrant city in the middle of a massive, empty desert. A safe haven for many of the Wasteland's travelers, including you. As you'd imagine, it's pretty much the hotspot in this game in the same way Fallout 3 had Megaton and Fallout 4 had Diamond City. You know why you're here though, and the casino Benny can be found in is the Tops. And I gotta say, this game gives you a very generous variety of ways to kill him. You can go and straight up just shoot him on the casino floor, lure him up to his room and shoot him, go through the entire Legion quest line and have him fucking crucified. Or my personal favorite, if you're playing a female character with the Black Widow perk, you can seduce him and then kill him after you have sex with him. If you couldn't tell by now, the things you can do in this game just because you have a specific perk activated is honestly comical, and I'm all here for it. So, Benny's dead, you have your package, time to go back to work. Except thankfully, the game has more. While the early game is pretty linear in the sense that Benny is your one major goal, this is the point of the game where you have to start picking sides. After killing Benny, all three of the major factions make contact with you and grant you a reputation reset. I'm pretty sure this is just a deterrent so that new players don't accidentally fuck up the entire rest of the game, but on repeat playthroughs, this ability makes it so easy to mess with each of them without gaining infamy in the early game. They will not let you have this luxury again though, so it's around this point in the story where your choices start to have a lot more weight. Either right before or right after dealing with Benny, you're called to the private Lucky 38 casino to meet with Mr. House one-on-one. Since he's the one the package was originally meant for, you get paid for finally delivering it. And it's here that you learn who Mr. House actually is. Mr. House is a billionaire that was born long before the Great War even started. Before the war, he was the CEO of Robco Industries, and a lot of his inventions can be found throughout the map. By the time the Great War started, he created a life support system for himself, as well as a network that would allow him to control a vast army of robots called Securitrons around the Mojave Wasteland, and ultimately allow him to control Vegas. Unfortunately, for the past 200 years, he's been running on an inferior OS, because the one loose end he missed was a poker chip-shaped storage device known as the Platinum Chip. He designed most of his software around it, but unfortunately, it got lost in the ruins when the bombs dropped, literally the day before. That was until it was discovered and ordered to be delivered by you. And of course, that's where the game began. So, you finally get some answers. Benny stole the chip from you in an attempt to overthrow Mr. House with his own code. It's here where you also learn the main conflict between all three factions. The NCR and Legion are basically mortal enemies, and their two main territories are very close in proximity to each other. The NCR occupies Hoover Dam, while the Legion occupies a massive camp atop Fortification Hill. Very soon, the Legion will attack and attempt to drive the NCR out of Hoover Dam, and the entire rest of the game is centered around preparation for the upcoming battle. Mr. House explains that he wants you to be his protege, someone who can carry out tasks in his will that he wouldn't be able to do without compromising his life support, and that's what the majority of his questline is throughout the entire game.
The salient issue is that they will go to war with me, if given the chance. There's just one reason why the NCR hasn't contrived some outrage to justify invading the Strip. Caesar's Legion. The final battle between those two armies is fast approaching. I can't afford to let either side win on their terms.
Mr. House is an autocrat, someone who believes they should have absolute power. He sees himself as the only person able to truly bring the world back to economic success, even superior to that of the old world. He sees Vegas as a remnant of what mankind once was, before being reduced to their most primal instincts. He's politically for economic progression, while still wanting to conserve the sense of civility the old world once had. In the Fallout universe, socially the world never moved past the 1950s era of fashion and mannerisms. So, Mr. House, someone who is 261 years old, lived through this sense of formality and was able to see the rise of many different tribes, a complete opposite of what his pre-war life was once like. He was, however, able to employ and adopt the three families you see on the Strip in-game into this formal lifestyle, away from their tribal traditions. Of course, there's a few points in-game where you can tell these families really haven't fully grown away from their roots.
For the last time, the White Glove Society has never and will never consume human flesh for any reason. It's written in the charter. Now, didn't I already tell you that we don't do that sort of thing? We do not engage in cannibalism here under any circumstances. Though we haven't always been the White Glove Society. There was another time, a dark time, when we went by a different name. But that's all changed now. We've evolved past such base impulses since settling into our new home. I've seen to it that those days are behind us.
Unfortunately for Mr. House, if you as the player choose so, him inviting you can end up being his undoing, since the player can release him from his life support chamber and kill him. Afterwards, the courier can have a very dangerous and unrestricted access to Mr. House's vast network of code. This is important for an optional fourth ending, my personal favorite, which I'll get to later. The New California Republic, as I mentioned earlier, are a self-proclaimed government body that attempts to recreate a similar sense of order and government to what the old world once had. Their structure is similar to the US military we have today in real life, and they have a democratically elected president that acts as their commander-in-chief. During the events of the game, their president is Aaron Kimball, who you only see for one quest. It's a very major story quest that involves either stopping the assassination of Kimball or directly causing it, depending on who you're ultimately siding with at this point in the game. There's also a man named General Oliver, who is a central character during the final quest of the game. The highest ranking NCR official that you can meet outside of quests is Chief Hanlon, who resides at a camp off the side of Lake Mead, overlooking Caesar's Fort. Hanlon is honestly one of the most interesting characters in the game for me. He's a jaded war veteran who still serves as the chief of the NCR Rangers, the Rangers being the NCR's most elite units, those who can handle what many standing in the army alone can't on their own. Being in such a high position of power, Hanlon is mentally and physically drained, and seems to have lost all hope in the NCR and their chances at the upcoming battle when you actually find him. He's staring off into the distance at Caesar's Fort just across the lake, seemingly in deep thought. Hanlon actually commanded the troops at what was the first Battle of Hoover Dam. After struggling against Caesar and his army back then, you can find out in the quest Return to Sender that his lack of morale has now led to him falsifying reports to give the other Rangers the hope he doesn't have.
In big battles, Caesar deploys his legionaries in waves. Recruits up front, prime soldiers behind the recruits, old guard bringing up the rear. Opponents wear themselves out dealing with the first two waves, if they survive that long. When the veterans step up, there's not much fight left. Caesar can adapt, though, and when required, he can run any mix of legionaries as skirmishers and still retain order in the ranks. Joshua Graham, Caesar's old legate, he wasn't so flexible. When the Legion attacked Hoover Dam, General Oliver ordered his troopers back to the middle ground just after first contact. Graham pushed all of the legionaries onto the dam, filling the east side with recruits up front and veterans in the back, by the book. But once they were in, they were stuck there. Oliver's troopers were entrenched and wouldn't give a foot. That's when we ordered the Rangers and the 1st Recon sharpshooters to start picking off veteran Legion officers from a high ridge west of the dam. That only lasted about a minute before Graham ordered the back ranks to push through to the front and rush the ridge. Caused total chaos among the younger legionaries. Oliver's troopers fell back to the side walkways and stayed out of the veterans' way. By the time the veterans got to the ridge, we were already in Boulder City. They followed us down there, but we were out before they realized what was happening. We'd packed the old city with C4 and dynamite. Crude, but it did the job. Those who didn't die in the blast were in no position to mount a defense. The ones left on the dam didn't know what to do. The troopers routed them. Graham pulled the remaining legionaries back, but the battle was over. He went south, back to the Grand Canyon, back to Caesar. And that was the last we saw or heard from Joshua Graham. Sorting and manipulating intelligence is what I do. It's what Rangers are supposed to do. This job isn't all gunfighting and gulping shots of whiskey, no matter what the boys and ladies out there say. You have you? Misdirection. When you're pinned down, outnumbered, and 2 days from any help, it's just about the best friend you can have. Misdirection's what saved me all these years. It's what saved us at Hoover Dam. But it's been 5 years now, and Caesar's right across that lake. He's closer now than he ever was before. I was a young man once. I know what it's like to want to fight for your home. But this isn't it. It's never gonna end. This fight with Caesar. People back home don't know what these young men and women are in for. The Legion is the worst enemy we've ever faced. But we can't stop Caesar here. Not without getting a lot of good people killed. more than anyone cares to count up. But even if we do stop him, I don't see how we're ever going to be able to pull out. First thing that comes to mind is to turn me in. But that might not be the best play, all things considered. Even if your heart's in the right place, I reckon it might do a lot more harm than good. Oliver can't stand that Rangers got credit for victory at Hoover. Whatever I recommend, he does the opposite. I said I wanted us on the ridge. He put them right on the western part of the dam itself. We don't have enough firepower to hold that spot. If the troopers fall back, and they will, the Rangers will advance to cover Oliver's retreat. We lose the dam, Oliver and the center are ruined. I don't know if you're working for Caesar, or if desperation's made me a heck of a lot more persuasive. Either way, this is the right thing to do. Now, I trust we're done discussing this. I'm gonna step through that door and pretend like we never had this talk.
Controlling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Unfortunately, Hanlon is right to some degree. The NCR faces a lot of issues, but by far the biggest we see in-game is the fact that they are pulled way too thin. Between troops, supplies, and willing combatants, there's an inconsistent ratio of all this to NCR territory. Although they never want the public to know it, they're being torn apart at the seams. The only thing separating them and the Legion is the Colorado River, which provides at least some kind of protection from a total invasion. Given that the NCR are soldiers of Western territory, almost everything west of the Colorado is theirs, while the Legion occupies a large segment of the east and small platoons in the west. There's a few places in-game where you can find the NCR and other factions in a chokehold, most notably Nelson, a small town that the Legion has actively locked down in order to annex more land before the battle. There's also Camp McCarran, which used to be an airport for the city of Las Vegas and has now turned into an NCR outpost. Here, they utilize the monorail to travel around the Mojave, but unfortunately it's been heavily degraded over time, making matters even worse for NCR travel and supply runs. In the outer walls of Vegas, brutal raiders known as the Fiends constantly terrorize the area, especially those in the NCR. Helios 1 is a broken power plant that the NCR has troops attempting to repair, as well as defend against a faction known as the Brotherhood of Steel. The Powder Gangers have total control over what once was a functioning NCR prison. You get the point. The NCR can't govern the land they have, and the Courier is their Hail Mary, the last push they need to successfully defend the dam by requesting that they do tasks for them. The Legion are probably to most people the most brutal and unforgiving faction in-game. They're modeled after the Roman Empire and their chains of command. Anyone who is against them is deemed a filthy profligate, deserving of death by crucifixion or living to become a Legion slave. They rule with fear and act as a terrifying tribal force, with their leader being a former member of the NCR named Edward Sallow, who obviously adopted the name Caesar. The Legion is made up of 87 different tribes. I say made up very loosely because the Legion is the only tribe. All 87 tribes at one point or another were bled into the Legion. A mass of lost culture and history, the Legion often kills members of tribes and takes their children to indoctrinate them into the ways of the Legion.
Caesar takes the tribal out of the tribe. Scrapes and burns off tattoos, breaks up families, forces mixed breeding so all the old loyalties die away. The only tribe in the Legion is the Legion. Caesar is their chief, father, and god, all rolled into one.
Most Legion troops were born into it or raised on it, which is what makes the Legion such a hazardous enemy. Unlike NCR soldiers, legionaries are taught that death by battle is a glorious honor and a symbol of your service to Caesar. They are borderline suicidal. After being invited to meet Caesar, He seems impressed with your ability to make a name for yourself in such a short time, and asks you to perform various tasks to make sure he can achieve his ultimate goal for Vegas: complete and total control of the wasteland, showing no profligate any form of mercy, with the exception of you for your services. Unlike Mr. House, who is a dictator with a self-described sense of civility, Caesar is a fascist dictator who wishes to rule with fear, allowing only the strongest to serve him, the rest to be enslaved or killed. Throughout his quest, we learn the story behind the Legion's defeat at the First Battle of Hoover Dam. Originally, the Legion started with Caesar and a man named Joshua Graham.
Losing the dam was the worst defeat the Legion ever suffered. Graham had been with Caesar since the beginning, but he had to set an example. The Praetorians covered Graham in pitch, lit him on fire, and down into the Grand Canyon he went. It's not that clear-cut. You have to understand, Graham was the toughest son of a gun anyone around these parts had ever seen. Before Hoover, we had 5 kill reports on Graham from Rangers and 1st Recon sharpshooters who tried to take him out. Some folks think he's still alive. Call him the Burned Man.
It is a great honor for anyone outside the Legion to get an audience with Caesar. The Burned Man was Caesar's advisor and general when the Legion was originally formed. The Burned Man led us to a disastrous defeat at the dam. On Caesar's orders, the Burned Man was covered in pitch by the Praetorian Guard, lit on fire, and cast into the Grand Canyon. Caesar has forbidden us from ever speaking his true name again, and so we simply refer to him as the Burned Man.
After Graham's punishment, Caesar took on a new legate named Lanius, a brutal battlefield commander and probably the character with the most badass voice in the entire game.
An envoy of Vegas, yet you carry yourself for battle. If so, you cannot truly be of that city of cowards. We shall see how brave you are when nailed to the walls of Hoover Dam, your body facing west so you may watch your world die.
Unfortunately for Caesar, it becomes more apparent through his quest that while the NCR struggles, as much as he hates to admit it, the Legion struggles too. Ironically, Caesar made the same 2 fatal flaws the real Julius Caesar made in his empire. Firstly, Caesar doesn't have a very clear or stable line of succession. While Lanius is an excellent battlefield commander, he only sticks with the Legion because he feels indebted to Caesar himself, and views the Legion as the ultimate way to carry out his will, even in death.
Lanius is the greatest of my battlefield commanders. Some might call him a great man, but I'm not sure he qualifies. Lanius is savage. Savagely loyal too, but only to me. He has no love for my Legion, but this has its uses. He has no attachment to his men, no compunction about battlefield losses. All he cares about is destroying the enemy.
There's also Lucius, and while he's the command of Caesar's personal guard, even if Caesar's dead, it's made clear that he isn't even sure if he's the next choice in succession after Lanius.
Legate Lanius has not chosen anyone to be his second yet. It would be an honor to be selected, though.
The second flaw is the Legion's failure to comprehend how much land they have to manage. The real Roman Empire is often debated to have fallen because of its vast size, and the same applies to Caesar in-game. In the final confrontation with Lanius at the Battle of Hoover Dam, it's possible with a maxed out speech skill to convince him that it will be impossible to hold both the East and West.
An envoy of Vegas, yet you carry yourself for battle. If so, you cannot truly be of that city of cowards. I see you fight with words, like all beneath the flag of the bear. Let us hope your skill with weapons proves greater. So you seek quarter? Terms of surrender? Our roads into NCR are hung with the bodies of those who attempted to negotiate with us. Save your speeches. We will take Hoover Dam and move forward until our feet crush the setting sun beneath them. Hoover Dam has never seen the mass strength of the East. Only legates such as Graham, who deserve the fire Caesar blessed him with. Now I am here, and make markers of your people as the Legion carves its way west. You speak in circles. What of the East? I am the East, and I will prove it this day. The victory here shall be swift. Our forces shall take the dam, secure it, then build a road west on the bodies of the NCR. The East will hold. Once across the Colorado, nothing to rival Hoover Dam remains. Your weakness? You seek to thwart me by claiming the Legion is too strong for you. That does not mean we would not succeed. The East was a hard-fought campaign. Even now, Caesar drew too much of the Legion's blood needed there for this. Hoover Dam is but a place. I will not have it be the gravestone of the Legion, whether quickly, or as you describe, slowly, by attrition. As for wisdom, there is wisdom in your words, man of the West. Know that I shall return east. I shall not remain there forever. On that day, the strength of the bear shall be tested. If the West is one day filled with ones such as you, perhaps it shall be a worthy fight indeed. My coming would have saved you, set your people free in ways they cannot see. War would have tested them, broken the weak with its violence, yet allowing the strong to arise. Violence gave you that strength, awakened you. I can see it upon your face, where 2 bullets left their mark. Perhaps it is unfortunate Vulpes was not here to hear your words. Something tells me you would prove more than his match. Until the day when our armies meet again, Courier. I shall wait for you on the battlefield.
Later in his questline, you also find out Caesar is ill and has a deadly brain tumor. Similar to the NCR, all of these issues require someone to help. Really, all of the factions require some kind of a Hail Mary. And not even in a poorly written main character plot armor way, it genuinely feels like you just happen to accidentally become popular at the right time. And all 3 of these factions just need a little extra push from someone willing to do the dirty work. I honestly can't praise this game enough for its writing in that regard. But what if you really don't prefer any of these factions? What if their values are just personally not in line with yours? Well, there is one more option. Although I didn't go too in-depth about it before, there is obviously a specific reason Benny stole the Platinum Chip. In the tops, in Benny's personal room, you can find a rogue and reprogrammed Securitron hidden in his walls. His name is Yes Man, and unfortunately for him, his name is very accurate because he literally can't say no to any of your requests. So, once Benny is dead, this guy is your go-to for the independent Vegas ending. In other words, you get to choose how Vegas runs. You get to go around and pick which factions you like and which ones you don't. You can completely wipe a faction off the face of the earth if you really wanted, and it would have a great effect on the ending. This is by far my favorite ending, and I don't think it requires too much explanation why. It really allows the player to learn about each faction and make decisions on them based on their own actual moral code. In a way, your courier follows what you, the player, choose to make them be. Not to mention, it makes the game so much more replayable when you could switch up your stance on different factions on each playthrough. For a 2010 game, the amount of endings for each settlement or characters is so amazing. And speaking of settlements, I'm going to briefly go into the different factions you can meet on an independent playthrough, because together, the side factions arguably end up being just as important as the main ones. The Boomers are the first story-relevant side faction most people will probably encounter in New Vegas. All three of the main factions request that you meet them since their specialty is explosives, so they're a very powerful ally to have for the final battle. They're also very reclusive and will bomb the ever-living shit out of anything that moves near their airbase. None of them leave, so it's essentially the North Sentinel Island of the Fallout universe. You are the first person to step foot in or out in years. Their main quest is just helping them out with various tasks to make their life better, like cleaning out their generator room filled with explosive ants for some reason. Or some basic tasks such as listening to a small child explain their history or help at the medical center. But the main way to gain the Boomers' ultimate trust is to help them acquire a World War II bomber that's been sunk to the bottom of Lake Mead. From there, the Boomers will idolize you and rain actual hellfire on whoever you're fighting with in the final battle. These guys have to be one of my favorite side factions in the game lore-wise. Their reclusive nature, as well as just their explosive tendencies, makes them so interesting in comparison to some of the other factions. I'll still forever be annoyed by the slightly annoying process of trying to reach them on each playthrough, though. The Brotherhood of Steel is probably what I'd consider to be the face of the entire series. They're in pretty much every game, and their power armor is easily the most recognizable thing to non-Fallout fans next to Vault Boy himself. Of course, in New Vegas, they're still portrayed very well. In the small Hidden Valley area, you can find the Brotherhood's primary bunker, and while they're not as reclusive as the Boomers, they're still very cautious with outsiders. The Brotherhood primarily believes in preserving and regulating the use of pre-war technology, as they believe it's far too harmful for just anyone to have. Honestly, don't blame them when a shoulder-mounted nuke blaster is being commercially sold down the street. The Brotherhood has probably the most annoying quest in the game on repeat playthroughs. It involves you going to various dangerous locations and scrounging around in enemy-infested vaults to grab key items for them, and then going up a super mutant-infested mountain to install a chip in a terminal at the summit. It's well worth it though, because the quest reward is gaining the ability to actually wear power armor. Probably the sickest thing in any Fallout game ever. Oh yeah, and it's also possible to outright kill them all by just pressing the self-destruct button in their bunker. 10 out of 10 faction. Will forever love the power armor drip. I feel like when people think of New Vegas exclusive factions, they usually think of the Great Khans first. A bunch of people in biker outfits in the middle of the desert sums up Nevada's soul pretty well. They actually used to be the Mojave's dominant faction, but by the time Mr. House claimed Vegas as his territory, they ended up being driven out to an area called Bitter Springs in the northern part of the map. That was until they ended up getting into trouble with the NCR and fled to Red Rock Canyon after what became known as the Bitter Springs Massacre. The Great Khans also happen to be the biggest suppliers of drugs and ammo in the Mojave, so from a gameplay standpoint, they're probably the best side faction to be on good terms with. By default, they're always on the side of the Legion due to their poor history with the NCR in the final battle. Their main quest revolves around getting them to either switch sides or outright leave the Mojave altogether. The Powder Gangers are a very prominent faction in the early game. Any farther than that, you don't really see them that much. They are natural experts in explosives, as their name suggests, and are somewhat anarchic people. They're hated by pretty much every faction for their hostility, but in the early game, the courier is very easily able to befriend them. Their introductory quest, Run Goodsprings Run, is essentially the opposite of Ghost Town Gunfight, where you're instead on the opposing side of the fight. I've never actually been able to do this quest, and recording this might have actually been my first time ever completing it. There's something so evil to me about intentionally betraying the people that helped you get back up on your feet in the first place. Otherwise, there are a separate group of powder gangers inhabiting the abandoned Vault 19, and you can run a few quests for them as well. Probably one of the most iconic factions in the Fallout franchise next to the Brotherhood, the Enclave were the main antagonists of Fallout 2 and have a heavy role in 3. In New Vegas, though, they've become largely extinct, with your only access to the faction being a companion named Arcade Gannon. Remember earlier I said I had a favorite? Yep, that's this guy. By far my favorite written companion in this game. The Enclave was known for being a very brutal fascist regime, showing extreme racism and genocide to ghouls, mutants, and those in other factions. The faction was started years before the game took place by members of what used to be the US military. Now under the flag of the Enclave, they literally view themselves as the real United States government, one line of secession all the way from George Washington. But because of their lost influence, by the time the game takes place, only legends are left behind. Naturally, Arcade is a bit ashamed of this past and their horrific crimes, so he chooses to hide it from you until you progress through the story and gain his trust. Once you do, though, you unlock my personal favorite faction quest in the entire game, For Auld Lang Syne. In this quest, you go around the Mojave, gathering the remnants of the Enclave so that they may vow to fight for you in the Battle of Hoover Dam. This is also a way to get power armor training outside of the Brotherhood, and in my opinion it gives you the best looking, and also objectively most defensive, armor in the entire game. I definitely left a couple out, mainly the Raider factions, but this is a list of the more prominent side factions, and also the ones that don't try to kill you on sight. Moving on. Before I talk about the final battle, it would be a crime if I didn't talk a bit about the actual RPG elements here. And to me, a good RPG comes with a wide variety of builds. In New Vegas, there's 235 weapons, and 79 of those are unique weapons. This is all between guns, energy weapons, melee weapons, and unarmed weapons. First of all, unarmed and melee builds are just outright beastly if you know what to upgrade. Guns are just a jack of all trades, and energy weapons are just crazy fun to use. The only criticism I have is that there's not enough energy weapons in this game, which is a real shame because I absolutely love using them. New Vegas revolves heavily around the stats you apply to your character throughout your playthrough, with each of your special stats affecting the effectiveness of your skills. For example, someone with a strength stat of 10 out of 10 is going to be absolutely pummeling anything with a melee or unarmed weapon, but be a little less skilled with guns or energy weapons. For the hell of it, let me know your favorite build in the comments. As you can see in the video, I've spliced together all this footage from melee and energy weapon playthroughs. My favorite build to do is definitely an unarmed build though. It's crazy fun to see enemies go flying. Anyways, New Vegas has a very wide array of enemies in the Wasteland, and I can't love the variety enough. Each enemy is specifically placed with difficulty and lore alike in mind, and nowhere does an enemy ever really feel out of place or like it shouldn't be there. I genuinely don't think I have any criticisms with the enemy design choices in this game. I love all of them. Even Cazadors, because I know Cazadors get a lot of hate. So, you got your weapons, your build, all the allies and preparations you want, and now it's time for battle. The second Battle of Hoover Dam is an amazing conclusion, especially if you're playing an independent playthrough. It's just the culmination of all your faction decisions in-game in one battle. Convinced the Great Khans to break ties with the Legion, they won't even show up. Convinced the Brotherhood to temporarily side with the NCR in a truce, now they're here. Convinced the Enclave to side with the NCR or Legion, they're by your side as you're going through. The whole Wasteland is caught up in your decisions, and ultimately this battle ends with one of two commanders on each side falling. Legate Lanius or General Oliver, or even both. At the end, you're given the results of your playthrough through a slideshow. I don't think my words will do this justice, so I'm just gonna play the clip of the ending I got for the playthrough I recorded for this video.
And so the courier who had cheated death in the cemetery outside Goodsprings cheated death once again, and the Mojave Wasteland was forever changed. The courier, with the aid of Yes Man, drove both the Legion and the NCR from Hoover Dam, securing New Vegas's independence from both factions. With Mr. House out of the picture, part of the Securitron army was diverted to the Strip to keep order. Any chaos on the streets was ended. Quickly. Chaos became uncertainty, then acceptance with minimal loss of life. New Vegas assumed its position as an independent power in the Mojave. Supporting the ideals of independence, the courier was recognized as the man responsible for a truly free New Vegas. He ensured Mr. House's tyranny was broken, and neither Caesar's Legion nor NCR would ever gain control over New Vegas.
Though the wasteland became anarchic after Hoover Dam, the Boomers' display of power dissuaded fortune seekers from attempting to penetrate Nellis.
Buried beneath tons of rubble, the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel was no more. Those few who were outside the Hidden Valley bunker when it was destroyed settled into new lives, or headed west to find a new chapter to join.
After the courier ensured New Vegas remained free, the followers found that independent Vegas was even more unstable and violent than before. Old Mormon Fort became excessively burdened by the influx of patients, struggling to provide even the most basic of services.
Arcade was tending to the locals of Freeside when he learned that Caesar's Legion had been defeated, and NCR was being pushed out of New Vegas. Though he found that independence for New Vegas was not all he hoped it would be, Arcade did his best to help the locals govern themselves.
With New Vegas's independence formally declared, Goodsprings thrived. More travelers stopped by Goodsprings on their way to and from the Strip, and the locals grew prosperous from the traffic.
Thanks to the courier and Lily, a cure for the Nightkin's schizophrenia was found shortly after Dr. Henry's experiment concluded. Nightkin and other super mutants in the wasteland flocked to Jacobstown, and the town became known as a haven where a mutant could find peace.
Lily continued to take her medicine at half doses, and although she remembered her grandchildren, her mind remained muddled and confused. Eventually, she parted ways with the courier and traveled west, seeking the remnants of her past.
Following the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, Freeside came to be known as one of the more stable areas in the region. Ironically, NCR refugees found Freeside safer than most of the rest of New Vegas, where resentment still lingers.
Revitalized by Violetta's brain, Rex eventually learned to balance the memories of his old life with Violetta's experiences among the brutal fiends. His mind had difficulty adjusting, but Rex eventually found peace with his new, more vicious self.
Driven into a frenzy by their use of Psycho, the Misfits inflicted heavy casualties on the Legion during the defense of Camp Golf. At first, they were commended for their valor, but eventually, desperate for more of the chem, they turned on travelers in Outer Vegas. For their dishonorable conduct, the NCR court-martialed and executed them by firing squad.
The NCR, battered by the loss of the dam, were unable to devote any troops to retaking the correctional facility from the Powder Gangers. As a result, Powder Ganger raids on caravans became an unfortunate fact of life in the Mojave for years to come.
Armed with a wide array of improvised explosives and stolen weapons, the Vault 19 Powder Gang tormented the Mojave wasteland for years. Citizens of the NCR were favored targets, and they always suffered the worst fates.
After Hoover Dam, Sheriff Myers runs Primm with his own style of frontier justice. He deals with most folks fairly, but now and then someone winds up dead with little to no evidence against them. Despite distinguishing themselves during the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, the Rangers' victory was short-lived due to the courier's interference. Chief Hanlon personally directed the evacuation of the Rangers to Mojave Outpost as they fell back into NCR territory. Bitter over the waste of life in the Mojave, Hanlon stepped down from his post. After a campaign in which he denounced Oliver's and Kimball's hawkish, imperialist ways, Hanlon was elected as the Senator of Redding.
After their bold arrival at Hoover Dam, the remnants disappeared as quickly as they came. Legends of their power spread throughout the Southwest, a reminder of why people once feared the sight of vertibirds in the sky.
And so the Courier's Road came to an end, for now. In the new world of the Mojave Wasteland, fighting continued, blood was spilled, and many lived and died just as they had in the old world. Because war never changes.
The ending of New Vegas has a very human aspect to it, and that's that there is no good ending. As the last slide points out, the violence and disagreements humans have is inevitable and brutal, and even when people left the vaults and the world had what you could call a clean slate, ideologies still conflicted, people were killed. Ultimately, Fallout's ultimate lesson is spelled out for you twice in this game, once in the intro cutscene, and once at the ending slide. The lesson that war never changes, but nonetheless, your decisions will still always matter. Thanks for watching me ramble about this game. It really is a pleasure to dive back into it again, and I'm sure it won't be long before I do it again, especially with Season 2 of the show coming out soon. I might even make a video covering the DLC, but this is my take at a longer format video, and I hope it's at least somewhat good quality for you guys. As I said in my last video though, if I ever think of a topic, I'll make it. Until then, see ya.